How confident are you that you're choosing the right reference for your pen and ink landscapes? In today's lesson, we'll use a guideline that will help your compositions stand out when drawing realistic landscapes with pen and ink from reference. I shot these 5 landscape photos near my home in British Columbia. Pick the top 2 images that seem like the best compositions to draw with pen and ink. Remember your choices, and now we'll evaluate them based on 3 sets of criteria: structure, focal point, and inspiration, or fun factor. The first criteria in our rating guide has to do with how the composition is naturally structured. Look for a distinct background, middle ground, and foreground. It's best to have a background, middle ground, and foreground in a landscape because these create overlapping elements. Overlaps in a composition make it easier to establish a sense of depth using pen and ink. In picture A, the horizon line divides the space into background and foreground. The house then becomes the middle ground. Visually, the foreground might cause issues. The vantage point is the cause. A vantage point is the angle at which the photo was taken. But in a drawing, it's also the position of the viewer, and that's an important consideration for visual storytelling. The foreground could cause problems at the inking stage because it's too far in the composition for us, the artist, to create a clear overlap. You see, the stones and river, they're nearly at the same tonal value. There's a risk there it might not turn out well. Is this an easy fix? We could place a branch or a larger boulders on the edge of the picture plane, but the vantage point makes it tricky for a convincing background. So I say no here. This is not an easy fix. The second criteria in our rating guide has to do with visual storytelling. Does the image effectively lead the viewer to a point of interest? If not, how believably could we create a focal point? So in picture A, where does your eye land first? The house on the hill immediately draws my attention. There's contrast, light against dark. The angles in the landscape naturally converge towards the house, such as the river and the hills, and these stringy cirrus clouds point to the house. So yes, there is a natural focal point in this photo. Is it inspiring? The third criteria in our rating guide is more of an overall feeling. Is this reference too simple, too complex for your ability? How excited are you to render this image? I like the composition a lot because there's opportunity for texture variety with different types of elements, and the lighting provides a clear delineation of shadows, which makes this reference easier to draw convincingly. So I say yes, this reference does inspire me to draw. In our guideline, we assign 2 points for yes, 1 point for easy or medium, and 0 points for a no. Picture A therefore gets an 8 out of 10 in total. Even though the foreground flowers are blurry, it would be easy to enhance the foreground using additional references. This photo was shot low from the ground, looking up, which makes an attractive composition. The vantage point provides perspective that balances the foreground, middle ground, and background in a pleasing way. So picture B gets a full score for structure. When you first look at this picture, where does your eye go first? My tendency is to look at this island first. However, my attention immediately shifts to the foreground flower, sort of back and forth. This is distracting, which means we have competing areas of interest. Would you want the viewer to focus on the flowers first or the island? You, the artist, can control this by placing the emphasis on one or the other with the use of values and your rendering technique. We'll talk more about how to achieve this later, but for now, we'll give it 1 point since it's an easy fix. I also give it full score on the fun factor because of the broad potential for texture variety. Rocks, plants, trees, water, mountains, even fog. If executed well, this would make a memorable subject. I give picture B a 9 out of 10 final score. In picture C, similarly to picture A, the foreground is further from the viewer. The grassy plain in the foreground is too spread out to render an overlap in a pleasing way. Unless you plan your values really well, the risk with this foreground is that it turns into visual noise. The viewer is standing at eye level. Again, you can test by overlapping an object to confirm whether this is an easy fix to add a foreground. I say not really. You could render a more imposing background, such as placing stronger emphasis on the clouds at the rendering stage, depending on your desired focal point. I first look at the tiny cabin, but the higher contrast in values around this side of the lake distracts me. There is potential for at least 2 more areas of interest, but the focal point in picture C is easy enough to control with a clever arrangement of values. Is it inspiring? Somewhat. I like the plant variety, the reflection in the lake, but overall this is not my first choice to create a feature illustration. Final score for picture C is 5 out of 10. Picture D has a prominent overlapping foreground with the beautiful cedar. A frozen lake for the middle ground, but the background is weak. There is insufficient distance front to back in the picture plane, but adding a mountain range and clouds in the background would help the structure. No, I don't give this full points though, but close. The focal point definitely is the big tree. Even if you let your eye wander through the scene, you naturally come back to the tree. So that's a strong focal point, the best one so far. Does this photo reference strike inspiration? It's a lot of the same thing. At first glance, I like this photo a lot. The bark texture looks fun to render and the lake is pretty. But when you convert to grayscale, imagine how repetitive the rendering would be for 80% of this image. Not much variety for textures. Even the lighting is flat. This feels more tedious than fun to render, so no. Final score, 7 out of 10 for picture D. Picture E, same lake, different vantage point, giving us a more apparent background. There is a hillside and potential for a cloud texture in the sky. The middle ground even has a boat and a distinct reflection in the water, a character and plants overlapping the scene in the foreground. Full score for structure. If you place a figure or a face in your illustration, you're guaranteed this will be the first point of interest. So the eye is instinctively compelled to look at the character first, then expands out towards the horizon, catches on the boat, then we're drawn further to the highlighted area in the sky. But then, look at the lake. Note how much real estate the lake takes up in this composition. Could the lake be the focal point? If the lake is not your desired focal point, it could otherwise be a huge distraction. Imagine rendering this lake with black lines, no color, just hatch marks. Look how the sharp contrast of this reflection divides the space. There is a risk that the lake would overpower the entire composition. Therefore, picture E has competing focal point and is not an easy fix, so 0 points. Is this picture inspiring? Yes, visually it's pleasing. There's many opportunities for learning, but my preference is to balance delight versus frustration. Count how many things in this image might cause problems at the inking stage. I see at least 4. The character, humans are hard to draw. The deck and the boat are technical compared to the organic elements of a typical landscape. And there's the reflection in the lake we talked about. Depending on your drawing level and inking experience, this project is full of traps, presenting the highest likelihood of problems, so no fun at all. 6 out of 10, the lowest score. Does that surprise you? Let's go back to our initial vote. Did your 2 favorites score the same as my evaluation? To be sure, let's take the top 2 contenders to the next stage of our landscape rendering project. Starting with picture A, second place, I got 8 out of 10. We said it needed a foreground, so let's put one in. In our thumbnail sketch, we'll map out the key elements. We also said the focal point would be the house. To be successful with our rendering, we'll need to plan the values so they lead the viewer to the house. Values are affected by the light source, so we established the direction of the light source first. Zoom in. The deepest shadows appear to be mostly on the right-hand side of the photo. Here on the house, trees, and stones. We'll go ahead and apply some of these darker tones to our thumbnail. Our aim is to control those values, to frame the focal point. Repeat the process with picture B, the winner from our evaluation exercise. We can tell that the source of light comes from the right-hand side because the darkest values in the image are all more prominently on the left side of the rocks and trees. Go ahead and outline the key elements. Here I'm filling in the values all at once. As you recall, the focal point was either going to be the island or the flower. Doing the thumbnail clarified that the island is the more natural emphasis, plus it confirms our initial observations that picture B makes the best composition for a pen and ink drawing. If you're wondering whether you need to do several more thumbnails to explore the values arrangements, it depends on your objective. If you're exploring concepts or different approaches to render an illustration, absolutely, fill the page with thumbnails. But today, we did a triage of photo references to find the best subject for a pen and ink drawing. We've achieved our goal. Some may argue that an artist should be able to draw anything. In theory, all 5 of these pictures are fine subjects, except one is guaranteed to turn out the way you want. Looking at the final illustration, just like the thumbnails, I kept the foreground values in light grays using 2 tones to lead the eye to the island first. The island is dark, rendered with contrasting values and framed in lighter tones. You can see how going through the rating guide to select a photo reference helped thinking through what we may have otherwise overlooked from a first glance. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I appreciate you take the time to give it a like, subscribe for more, and all the best with your inking projects.